There are times in life when you believe you finally understand someone, only for one quiet moment to reveal that you may have misunderstood them completely. You see their silence and assume they don't care. You notice their distance and think they've lost interest. You look at their calm expression and convince yourself that nothing affects them. But sometimes, the person who appears the calmest on the outside is fighting the greatest battle internally. Sometimes, the person who walks away isn't trying to escape you. They're trying to escape the emotional storm happening inside themselves. And when you're dealing with someone who has avoidant tendencies, that storm didn't begin when you entered their life. It existed long before you. You don't see the tension in their body when emotions become intense. You don't hear the thoughts racing through their mind when intimacy suddenly feels too real. You only see what happens on the outside, the silence, the withdrawal, the sudden need for space. But underneath that behavior can be a nervous system that has learned to stay alert. There may be a heart that genuinely wants connection while simultaneously fearing what connection might cost them. Somewhere along the way, they may have learned that love comes with pressure. Vulnerability creates discomfort, and getting too close can eventually lead to losing their sense of safety. So when you wonder why they suddenly pull away just as the relationship begins becoming deeper, the answer may be more complicated than simply, "They don't want me." They may not be escaping you at all. They may be escaping the vulnerable version of themselves they learned to protect years ago. Once you understand that, many of their confusing behaviors begin to look different. People often make quick assumptions about avoidance. They see distance and immediately label it as disinterest. They see silence and assume there are no feelings underneath it. But human emotions are rarely that simple. Avoidant people are not necessarily cold. They are often highly protected. They aren't automatically heartless. They may simply be extremely careful about who gets access to their emotional world. And sometimes they don't withdraw because they feel nothing. They withdraw because what they feel becomes difficult for them to regulate. Their emotional defenses usually didn't appear in adulthood. They often began much earlier. Maybe they grew up in an environment where emotions weren't openly discussed. Maybe the people around them were physically present, but emotionally unavailable. Maybe they repeatedly heard messages such as, "Be strong," "Stop crying," "Don't be so sensitive," or "Deal with it yourself." A child doesn't always need someone to directly tell them that vulnerability is unsafe. Sometimes they simply learn it through repeated experiences. They discover that showing emotion doesn't always create comfort. It may create tension, criticism, rejection, or discomfort. So they gradually learn to keep more of themselves inside. Eventually, independence becomes more than a personality trait. It becomes protection. As adults, they may become extremely comfortable handling everything alone, because relying on someone else never felt completely secure. They can genuinely crave intimacy while also feeling overwhelmed when another person gets emotionally close too quickly. What looks like them backing away may actually be their attempt to calm themselves down. What appears to be indifference may actually be their fear of becoming emotionally overwhelmed or losing their independence. This is where people often misunderstand them. They may not be running away from you personally. They may be trying to escape emotions they never learned to manage in a safe way. Psychology often describes this through deactivating strategies. These are automatic behaviors that reduce emotional closeness when intimacy begins feeling overwhelming. It can look like suddenly needing space after an emotional conversation. It can look like becoming overly logical when feelings become intense. It can sound like an internal voice saying, "I should step back. They don't really need me," or "Maybe they're better off without me." These reactions aren't always conscious attempts to destroy a relationship. Often, they're protective responses designed to restore emotional control.
And here's the contradiction that makes avoidant behavior so confusing. They can deeply desire connection, while simultaneously becoming uncomfortable with too much closeness. They want to be loved without feeling consumed. They want support without feeling controlled. They want intimacy without feeling as though they have to surrender their identity. That's why you may see them moving back and forth. They come closer, then retreat. They open up, then become quiet. They show interest, then suddenly create distance.
It doesn't always mean they're playing games. Sometimes they're experiencing a genuine internal conflict where their desire for connection is colliding with their fear of vulnerability. Understanding this changes how you respond. Instead of automatically taking their silence personally, you begin seeing the pattern underneath it. Instead of responding to their distance with more pressure, more questions, or emotional intensity, you learn to create a calmer environment. Because pressure rarely makes an avoidant feel safer. Demands, guilt, emotional confrontation, and forced closeness can activate the exact defenses you're trying to break through. What tends to reach them is different. Calmness, clarity, patience, emotional space. Communication that invites rather than demands. Reassurance that doesn't become pressure. Strength that doesn't need to control. When they experience you as emotionally steady rather than reactive, something can begin changing inside them. When your presence doesn't carry guilt, urgency, or overwhelming expectations, their nervous system has less reason to stay guarded. And when they finally feel that sense of safety, they can begin listening instead of defending themselves. They can begin trusting instead of preparing to escape. They can slowly reveal parts of themselves they usually keep hidden. An avoidant person can develop deep and meaningful emotional intimacy. But it usually happens when they don't feel rushed, trapped, judged, or forced to connect according to someone else's timeline. They open when their boundaries are respected rather than treated as rejection. They open when they know they can breathe. They open when they have room to process their emotions instead of being pressured to explain everything immediately. And when that happens, the emotional armor can slowly come down. Not dramatically, not overnight, but gradually, quietly, and honestly. That is often where genuine connection begins. Before you worry about finding the perfect words or choosing the exact right moment to connect with an avoidant person, you need to understand the foundation beneath everything you're trying to create. Their avoidance is not necessarily your enemy. It is often an old coping mechanism, a pattern they developed to protect themselves emotionally long before they ever met you. Once you recognize the person behind the distance, you can approach them differently. You stop trying to force your way through their defenses and begin reaching them through patience, consistency, and calm presence. And there is something you should always remember. You cannot truly reach an avoidant until you understand what their defenses are protecting. They may not be protecting themselves from you. They may be protecting themselves from the fear that intimacy will cause them to lose who they are. When they begin realizing that you're not trying to control them, consume their time, or take away their independence, something changes. They begin to feel that connection with you does not require them to sacrifice themselves. That's when trust can start replacing fear, and their heart can slowly become more available. If you genuinely want to understand how to communicate with an avoidant person, you have to understand what makes them feel emotionally secure. Their emotional language isn't built around intensity, dramatic declarations, or constant reassurance. It is built around safety. They need to feel that emotional closeness will not invade their personal space, overwhelm their mind, or force them into a level of intimacy they're not prepared to handle. This is where many people get confused. They assume that stronger connection requires more emotional conversations, more vulnerability, more reassurance, and more expressions of love. But with an avoidant person, increasing emotional pressure can create the opposite result. The harder you push,
the farther they may move. That doesn't automatically mean they don't care. Their nervous system may simply interpret emotional pressure as a threat, even when your intentions are loving. At the center of their fear is often one powerful concern. Can I remain myself while being close to someone? Their deepest fear may not actually be intimacy. It may be losing their identity within intimacy.
They may worry that getting emotionally close means sacrificing their freedom, independence, boundaries, personal space, inner peace, or ability to make their own choices. And whenever they sense those things are being threatened, old protective patterns can take over. They may become distant. They may stop communicating. They may become overly logical. They may shut down completely. Not necessarily because they want to get away from you, but because they are trying to get away from the emotional expectations they feel building around them. This is where many relationships accidentally fall into a painful cycle. The avoidant pulls back, so the other person pursues harder. More questions appear. More emotional conversations begin. More attempts are made to get an explanation, reassurance, or immediate clarity. But what feels like healthy communication to one person can feel like increasing pressure to the other. You move toward them, they step backward. You ask for more closeness, they create more distance. You want immediate answers, they need more time. And the cycle continues. The important thing to understand is that avoidant people can feel emotions very deeply. Their challenge is often not the absence of emotion, but difficulty processing emotional intensity in the moment. That's why your communication style matters so much. An avoidant person may listen closely for signs that they're about to be trapped, overwhelmed, judged, or expected to provide an emotional response before they're ready. They're constantly looking for evidence that they can remain themselves inside the relationship. So the most powerful communication often reduces pressure, protects their sense of independence, and gives them room to participate at a pace they can emotionally handle. They don't necessarily need distance from you. They need distance from emotional urgency. This isn't about walking on eggshells or pretending you have no needs. It's about learning how to communicate without turning your emotions into pressure. Speak clearly. Stay calm. Keep your energy steady. Don't chase when they're overwhelmed. Don't raise the emotional temperature just because they're becoming quiet. When you create emotional space, something important can happen. They stop preparing for the next emotional confrontation. Their body begins to relax. They stop expecting disappointment, criticism, or overwhelming demands. And once their nervous system no longer feels under threat, they have more capacity to actually be present with you. Avoidant people are not incapable of connection. They often struggle with connection when they feel pushed, rushed, or emotionally cornered. Take away the pressure, and you may begin seeing the part of them that genuinely wants closeness. This is why the less you force, the more freely they can move toward you. The less you demand, the more naturally they may give. The less you chase, the more their approach becomes a choice rather than a reaction. But emotional safety doesn't mean becoming silent or abandoning your own needs. It means expressing yourself calmly without demanding an immediate emotional response. It means allowing them time to process without automatically interpreting their quietness as rejection. It means maintaining your own emotional stability instead of making them responsible for managing your reactions. When you consistently create that environment, you can become something rare in their emotional world, a place where they can breathe, a place where they don't have to hide their feelings, a place where needing time isn't treated as betrayal, a place where slowing down doesn't automatically create conflict. Avoidant people rarely open because someone pressured them into opening. They open when they feel secure enough to choose vulnerability for themselves. Safety isn't created through dramatic declarations or grand romantic gestures. It is created through small, consistent signals. I'm here, but I won't overwhelm you. You can be yourself around me. Being close to me doesn't mean losing your freedom. When your communication carries that kind of calmness, your words no longer feel like something their nervous system needs to defend against. Instead, your presence begins to feel safe enough for their defenses to soften. And that's the real foundation of deep connection. Not pressure, not persuasion, not emotional intensity. Safety. Now, when people talk about 3 words that can sometimes affect an avoidant person more deeply than "I love you," they're not talking about some magical phrase. They're talking about psychology and the emotional patterns that influence how avoidant people respond to closeness. For someone who connects love with losing independence, even "I love you" can occasionally feel like pressure. It may unintentionally sound like an expectation or the beginning of emotional responsibility. So what kind of words can reach past those defenses? Often, they're not complicated or romantic at all. They're simple, grounding, and freeing. I get it. Those words may sound ordinary, but they can communicate something extremely powerful: understanding without control. When you tell an avoidant person, "I get it," you're communicating that they don't have to become someone else just to remain connected with you. You're telling them that their need for space doesn't automatically make them wrong. You're showing them that you can recognize their inner world without trying to take control of it. For someone who values autonomy deeply, that can create more emotional safety than a long speech ever could. It tells them that you understand their pace. You recognize that trust may take time. You aren't demanding that they suddenly become emotionally expressive just to prove that they care. And that matters because avoidant people can be extremely sensitive to the feeling that they're disappointing someone. They know they withdraw. They know they sometimes take longer to communicate. They know their silence can confuse the person who cares about them. Some may even carry a quiet belief that they're too distant, too complicated, or too difficult to love. So when someone calmly says, "I get it," it can soften that hidden shame. It tells them they don't have to perform emotionally to earn acceptance. It tells them that you can understand their pace without abandoning the connection. And sometimes, that simple feeling of being understood is exactly what allows them to stop defending themselves and finally begin letting someone in. They no longer feel like they have to act like someone they're not. For the first time, they feel that someone understands what is underneath their behavior, not just what they do, but why they do it. An avoidant person doesn't need someone who agrees with every decision they make. They don't need you to treat their boundaries as something so delicate that you're afraid to say anything. What they need is someone who can recognize the meaning behind those patterns. Someone who doesn't automatically interpret their need for space as a lack of love. Someone who understands that their distance may be protection rather than rejection. And when they experience that kind of understanding, something inside them begins to settle. When you tell them, "I get it," you're communicating that you're not trying to fight the way they function emotionally. You're trying to understand it instead of constantly resisting it. But there's an important distinction here. Those words should never become a manipulation technique. You shouldn't say, "I get it," simply because you're hoping they'll react differently or come running back. You say it because you genuinely recognize what they're experiencing. The purpose is to create emotional safety, not to control an outcome. When an avoidant person genuinely feels understood, they often begin to relax naturally. They may become more willing to participate, communicate, and move closer. Not because someone forced them to, but because closeness no longer feels like something they have to defend themselves against. That's the deeper meaning behind autonomy. For many avoidant people, having a sense of freedom is what makes closeness possible. When they feel free to remain themselves, they can move toward connection. When they feel controlled or pressured, their instinct may be to retreat.
This is why those simple words can carry so much weight. They protect something that matters deeply to them, the feeling that their inner world still belongs to them.
Think about the emotional walls they have built over the years. Those walls aren't always designed to keep everyone away.
Often, they're there because the person behind them is trying to keep their own emotions stable. And when they realize that someone truly understands why those walls exist, the walls don't have to function as barriers anymore. Slowly, they can become bridges. The person can begin stepping outside their emotional defenses without feeling completely exposed or vulnerable. So yes, I love you can be incredibly meaningful. But for someone who is highly protective of their independence, I get it can provide something different. It can create calm. It can lower fear. It can communicate that they don't have to abandon themselves just to remain close to someone. If there's one message you should remember, it's this: understanding can be one of the clearest forms of love for an avoidant person.
When you offer understanding without pressure, you're doing more than making them feel better in one moment.
You're gradually changing the emotional environment between you. Once an avoidant feels genuinely understood, the internal conflict between wanting connection and fearing connection can begin to quiet down. It doesn't vanish instantly, but it becomes less intense. And when that internal tension decreases, their behavior may begin changing in subtle ways. They might communicate more often, not perfectly, and not necessarily every day, but more openly than they used to. They may stay present during conversations where they previously would have withdrawn. Their messages may contain a little more thought. Their tone may feel warmer. Their actions may carry more intention. These changes usually aren't dramatic.
For someone with avoidant tendencies, small movements toward intimacy can represent enormous progress.
They may start conversations instead of waiting for you. They might check in without being asked. They could share something simple about their day or reveal a small detail about what they're thinking. Each of those moments can be their way of saying, "I'm letting you closer." And they do it because closeness no longer feels like an immediate threat. They feel that they can be seen without being criticized. They can connect without surrendering their independence. They can open up without believing they're going to lose their personal space. That's when old beliefs can slowly begin to change. Maybe closeness doesn't always lead to pain. Maybe love doesn't require losing yourself. Maybe independence and intimacy can exist together.
This is how avoidant patterns can gradually become more flexible. Not because someone forces emotional depth upon them, but because repeated experiences teach them that intimacy can be safe. Steadiness does what pressure never can. When they experience connection without fear, they can begin associating closeness with peace instead of emotional chaos. Vulnerability can start feeling relieving rather than dangerous. And something even deeper begins to happen. They learn to trust themselves inside a relationship. It's not only about trusting you. They begin discovering that they can remain emotionally grounded while being close to another person. That internal shift can change everything. When an avoidant person finally feels secure enough to connect, they can become deeply loyal, consistent, and intentional in their relationships. They don't always give their heart casually. They may take commitment seriously because allowing someone into their inner world can be a major decision for them. Once the fear becomes quieter and the emotional pressure disappears, you may finally see the depth that was hidden underneath all those defenses. This is why patience matters. This is why healthy emotional space matters. You're not simply dealing with someone who enjoys being alone, you're dealing with someone whose emotional system may have been designed around surviving emotional discomfort rather than experiencing connection safely. But survival patterns aren't permanent.